We're going to start with opening statements, and we are going to begin with Shelley Keiss.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to come here today. I have a question. How many of you are or have been married to a veteran? Raise your hand. Lots of hands out there. Well, first off, thank you to the veterans who have served. I was married to a military officer for 2 decades. And so to those of you who stayed home and kept the campfires going, I want to thank you for your service. I remember the deployments, the changing schools, the changes in your life, and most of all, I remember the family that you gather as you go from assignment to assignment. My name is Shelley Keiss, and I'm a candidate for Congressional District 2. I've spent 25 years in a real business experience learning and working in federal financial management. Your representative will go to Washington to do 2 things: to serve you and to manage the purse strings of the federal budget. I know how to do that. I've been doing it. About a month ago, I broke the story that in fact, the federal government knew there was an uptick in the central immigration surge on our southern border. In addition to that, they funded for it, and in addition to that, Congress passed it. Ladies and gentlemen, I will guard the federal financial assets and protect the resources of America. Thank you.
Am I up now? Great. Thanks everybody for coming out today, and thanks for our sponsors. I'm retired Air Force Colonel Martha McSally, and I'm running for Congress because I don't walk by a problem. And we've got a lot of problems facing our community and nation today. How many of you have faith in the federal government? Yeah, I didn't think so. In the things they're supposed to be doing, like making sure we have a military that will defend us, or secure our border, or take care of our veterans, they are failing miserably. And they're overreaching into other areas, whether it's Obamacare, or the IRS, or the NSA, to name a few. And the President and Congress, including both parties, quite frankly, are to blame. And Ron Barber is a part of the problem. I served for 26 years in the military with the core values of integrity, service, and excellence. And we need those core values in Washington, D.C. more than ever. The oath of office I took as an officer is the same exact oath as a member of Congress. I consider this my next assignment in civilian clothes. Service means helping others. Service means doing what's right regardless of the cost to you. Service in Congress means doing what's best for the community instead of what's best for your next election. And we need the core values I mentioned representing us and fighting for us in DC more than ever. There's 4 pillars to my campaign: the economy, leadership, government overreach, and national security and defense. I look forward to the dialogue on those important issues today. If you recall, I lost by 0.84% to Ron Barber in 2012, and that was in only a 147-day campaign. I actually was ahead election night, went to freshman orientation, was in the photo, and 11 days later I had to come back and concede. I need your help to win this time, to fight and serve in Washington, D.C., and beat Ron Barber. Thank you.
I am Air Force Command Chief Master Sergeant retired and International Business Executive Chuck Wooten. In my 21-year Air Force career, I advanced to the top of the enlisted leadership structure. My job there was to make sure that thousands of troops did their mission every single day, and they did it. In the 12 years of international business experience that I've had, along with 4 years of business ownership, I got it done, and I got it done every single day. But I didn't come here to recite my resume to you. I didn't come here to regurgitate facts off the internet, and I didn't come here to tug at your heartstrings with emotional stories. Ladies and gentlemen, I came here to offer solutions for what I intend to do when you send me to Congress. America is burning. This election in this district is likely the bellwether of our nation. It's time for you to closely scrutinize your candidates. You have to be certain that your voice is going to be heard in Washington versus John Boehner's voice being heard here. If you don't like what's going on in Washington right now, you have to change the type of person that you send there. I will gladly place my service to America, my business success, and my determination to make positive change in this country against anyone here today. My record speaks for itself, and it speaks volumes. Thank you.
All right, I guess we'll get into the questioning here. How are you all doing? Doing well?
Excellent.
Feeling good? Don't get too nervous here. All right. Last year, a bipartisan group of senators, the Gang of Eight, proposed an immigration reform bill that hasn't made it through the House. That bill called for legal status for illegal immigrants already here after certain border security measures are met. $6.5 billion to secure the border with Mexico, and a guest worker program for low-skilled workers, and increased immigration quotas for high-skilled workers. Had this made it to the House floor, how would you have voted and why? And
Can I up first?
Ms. Kais.
We'll start with Ms. Kais.
Okay. Thank you. Well, if this had made it to the floor, I would have voted no. And the game has changed now. But one of the things, if you look inside that bill, there's a lot more in it. And one of the things that is in that bill is a new visa, a visa for home health care workers. There were lots of things in that 800-page bill that needed to be investigated before we just pass comprehensive immigration. I support closing the border now. We would not be where we are today if we had closed that border instead of trying to pass that bill. What we do need to do is we need to stand on the shoulders of giants and do what we've done in business for years, and that's benchmark. We need to go to Yuma, and we need to look at how they secured the border in Yuma, and we need to do that here. Now is not the time for immigration. Now is the time for us to back up and set our compass in the direction of a future for America.
I do not support that bill because it's like the Obamacare of immigration reform. We know here in southern Arizona that our border is not secure. Rancher Kelly Glenn Kimbrough was driving along her ranch recently, a few weeks ago, and she came upon a group of about a dozen men who lay down in front of her truck, and she had to make a decision as to whether she was going to stop or run them over. She decided to stop, made sure the windows were closed, everything was locked, and made sure her weapon was in reach. As they climbed on her vehicle and she was fearing for her life, she rolled down the window and spoke to them in Spanish. And they spoke back to her in English and said, "We're from India. We need you to turn us in, call the police," which she did, and they let her get away. We're putting ranchers like Kelly Glenn Kimbrough in danger every day. She sent an email to both myself and Ron Barber. I put it in 2 op-eds. Barber didn't even get back to her. We all know in southern Arizona that our border is not secure. My most recent trip down there, I could have gone in and out of Mexico several times. I chose not to, but our border's not secure. Look, we need barriers and fencing. We need manpower at the border. We need intelligence-driven operations in order to detect, monitor, and intercept illegal activity. We need to reform our legal immigration system so it's responsive to our economic needs, and that needs to be our focus as we move forward.
Hold on, Mr. Wooten. Specifically, Ms. McSally, though, what did you not like about that? Because that bill did call for $6.5 billion to secure the border,
right,
and it did talk about visas and quotas.
Well, again, at the last minute, they threw a bunch of money at the border issue in order to get some more Republican votes. And I've spent a lot of time with the ranchers. The issue isn't necessarily resources. The issue is a failed strategy from Washington, D.C. We don't know if we need more resources until we actually get the men and women who are doing the best they can, but they have a failed strategy, at the border doing intelligence-driven operations. So we don't want to just throw more money at a bad strategy. We've got to fix the strategy.
I too would have voted no, primarily because I don't believe and I don't stand for anybody getting automatic citizenship in our country. You can call it immigration reform, you can call it amnesty, you can call it what it is, but I call it wrong, and I stand firmly against it in every regard. Now, the question was quite long, sir, so I'm going to ask you, is this regarding border security as well? Because in my world, those are two separate issues, and I treat them as such.
The question deals specifically with the bill that was passed by the Senate last year, and it does include border security measures.
Okay, very good. I still have a couple seconds left. We need to secure the border, period. There's no and then at the end of that sentence. There's a period. Because without a secured border, we've lost our national sovereignty. We have the greatest country on the planet, and the greatest country on the planet has the resources that it needs to secure that border and seal it off immediately. We have engineering and technology, we have construction, we have a ton of unemployed people in this country that would love to come down and build our fence while we're augmenting the Border Patrol with military augmentation. That's what I stand for, and I always will.
Okay, just to clarify, the bill called for legal status for illegal immigrants, not necessarily citizenship.
My answer doesn't change.
Okay.
All right, well, I want to say thank you for coming down here. It's been long awaited to have you guys in one room, and I'm really glad you guys chose to come down here in our district and to reach out to the general public. The question is going to deal still with border and immigration, and it's just going to ask for you to give us the high points of your immigration reform plan and tell us in which areas you're willing to compromise to break the gridlock on this issue. And it's going to start with Ms. Martha McSally.
Okay, thank you, Sergio. As I said in my last answer, we need a step-by-step approach. We have got to secure our border with intelligence-driven operations in a way that uses the resources, the manpower, the air assets, and the technology to detect, monitor, and intercept illegal activity. Right now, there's a defense in depth, and the manpower needs to be at the border. As we're reforming our legal immigration system, we need to do it. We need to modernize it so that it works for our economy. Our demographics are going down. We have baby boomers retiring, and in order to have the workforce that we need for the economy to grow, we need to reform the legal system so that it's responsive to our economic needs. We have a quota of 85,000 H-1B visas as an example, and in the first week in April, we turned away another 85,000 people who were willing to come here into jobs that were going to help the economy, entrepreneurs starting business. We turned them away. Right now, it takes way too long in order to come here and work on all ends of the spectrum. And so we need to reform that system. We also don't have a system to address 40% of the people who come here illegally come on a visa status that's legal and they overstay their visa. And we have no system in our country that actually tracks people when they're leaving. So part of the first steps of reform need to include a system that addresses that as well. And that'll be my focus when I get to Congress.
Me? Yes. Okay. The lights are bright. I thought I was pretty clear in my first answer, but I'll clarify even further. I'm not for immigration reform. I stand firmly against it. You reform something when it's needed. And what we have is not a broken immigration system. What we have is a system that is not enforced. America is a land of laws, and the laws that we have regarding immigration are sufficient. And to suggest that we need to fix something that's not broken, even though the Washington politicians will tell you that it's broken, is absolutely false. And as far as the notion of compromise to break gridlock, I'm sorry, I'm not interested in doing that. The Democrats can do that.
Mr. Wooten, a quick follow-up here. Senator McCain said recently that he doesn't think the Republicans can win the White House in 2016 if they block immigration reform. Would you agree with that?
I don't agree with much Senator McCain says. So no, I do not.
So to clarify also, you think that we don't need any reform, that the immigration program in place is good enough, we just need to enforce it?
We need to enforce it.
Okay.
Folks, I hate to be the one that keeps standing up here giving you the bad news, but I'm going to give you some more bad news. In 2010, Citizens Immigration Services began a huge initiative using Lean Six Sigma, a management process that looks at the steps in a process to streamline that process. Citizens Immigration Services is the group that passes out the visas. They started working on streamlining that process. Now today, you've heard that we're going to give refugee status to a lot of Central American immigrants that have come in. We're talking right now, do we need to reform this process? Is immigration broken? One of the highlights for Citizens and Immigration Services in 2011 was their ability to streamline that process. They're ready. Somebody's not watching. Someone's not paying attention. Is immigration broken? No, they're fixing it, and they're going to be ready to move quick. And we need to pay attention, and we need somebody in Congress that knows how to pay attention. I'm ready for the job.
All right, we're going to start with Mr. Wooten. And what do you see as the top 3 issues in CD2, and please be specific.
Certainly. The very top issue, and the issue that I announced is the top issue that I would be paying the most attention to when I announced my candidacy, was border security. Again, this lends itself not just to what's going on here in CD2 and the miles of border that we have, but this is also a national sovereignty issue. No one else is paying attention to it in Washington. I think we need to do that. So that's definitely number 1. Number 2 would be the economy and jobs. We have so many people that are not working that want to work. We have so many people that are trying to run businesses that are being crushed by the federal government. We have Obamacare looming on the horizon that threatens to crush us all. So the economy and jobs. The third issue, I'm going to piggyback on the Obamacare part, because that is the major issue, because it goes beyond economics. And so Obamacare must be repealed, and it must be repealed in its entirety.
We are facing a crisis on our border, and that crisis is turning into an economic crisis. On Monday morning, the American Association of Physicians and Surgeons will release a column that I wrote as a guest columnist, talking about the surge on our border and linking it to the economic impact of potential health crisis. The second issue is jobs. It's jobs. People need to work. We need to get high-paying jobs in southern Arizona. We need to secure our military assets. We have a potential of losing thousands of jobs in southern Arizona. We need to get on that right away. And the third issue, I'm going to add, just lumped together, and I'm going to call it the health industry. Whether it's the scandal at the VA, whether it's Obamacare, whether it's just the rising prices of health care, there are many of us in this room that do not still have the doctor because we couldn't keep the doctor we wanted. And we're seeing more and more changes. On Wednesday, the Senate will have a hearing that I would ask you all to tune into. It's on the status of inpatient versus observation. Please tune into that. This is a crisis that impacts all of us when we go to the hospital, and we need to be aware of this. Thank you.
When I announced my candidacy in October, we had 3 pillars of the campaign: the economy, leadership, and government overreach. In the last few months, after Russia invaded Ukraine, I added the national security and defense, and I hope we'll have other questions on that. But the top 3 issues, as I've traveled tirelessly throughout our district, continues to be the 3 that I just mentioned. Look, we can't do anything to secure our border or make sure we have a strong military unless we have the economic growth in order to do that. We have got to be able to support small businesses. And again, I hope we have more discussion on economic growth. I believe in getting the government out of the way and letting small businesses thrive. And Ron Barber believes in big government, high tax, more regulation kind of solutions. I announced yesterday that the Arizona Restaurant Association and the National Restaurant Association got behind me. They're joining the National Home Builders, the Associated Builders and Contractors, Home Depot, and some others that are concerned about jobs, looking at Ron Barber's record and knowing that we need someone in DC who's actually going to fight for economic growth, small businesses, getting people back to work in our area. On leadership, we have a failure of leadership, and Ron Barber is a bystander. We need someone who's not just going to introduce bills and have press releases, but actually get things done. And in government overreach, we don't have time to talk about the Affordable Care Act, or lack thereof, in one question, so I hope it's in another question. And I look forward to, there's a big contrast between us on that. I mean, Barber believes in Obamacare. He's doubled down on it many times. And I believe we need to repeal and replace it with thoughtful solutions that are patient-centered with choice. Thank you.
We're now going to move into the economy. The U.S. is on a destructive path of deficit spending. How can a freshman like you, when elected, help the Congress make a balanced budget and stick to it? And if cuts are required, what would be your first target? And we will start with Shelley Kais.
Thank you. Well, as many of you have heard me say, we have a $17 trillion national debt. So for every taxpayer, that's a check for $151,000. In addition to that, we have $121 trillion unfunded liabilities. So for each of you, that's about $1.2 million. Or you can kick the can down the road and pass it on to your children and your grandchildren. We need somebody in Washington who understands federal financial management and understands what we need to do to set the course to bring America back to prosperity. As a freshman, I may show up as a freshman, but I'm going to show up as a seasoned federal financial analyst with a solid working knowledge of appropriations law. So as I begin, I believe I will be able to start working with folks with a credible presence in my first committee meeting. As we look at the issues, I'm just going to give you some numbers. The VA wants $17.6 billion. President Obama wants $3.7 billion. Folks, we can't sustain this, and we need somebody who understands what's happened in the past that got us to this point and be able to see strategically and decide where we're going in the future. It is time for us to cut back, and I would begin cutting back in many of our programs that deal with immigration. Thank you.
Wait, excuse me. Can you be more specific? Many programs dealing with immigration. Where would you cut back?
Well, one of the programs where I think we ought to look at right away is the Office of Refugee Resettlement. That is the program right now that is responsible for what's going on where we are with our Central American folks coming across the border. That was budgeted for $168 million 2 years ago, and it popped up and went to $368 million the next year, and then $868 million. And what we've already promised, the Senate has already promised $1.94 billion for next year. That number is just popping up. We could also go into education and many other places. We need to cut back.
So we have $17 trillion of debt and growing, and this is not a sustainable path. If any of us were held to the same standards that the government is, if you think about it, if we had that kind of debt, that it was just, we were spending every year on the credit cards, we would lose our homes, all of our real property would be confiscated, and we would be in a real problem. But the federal government just keeps spending. We've got to grow our economy, and we've got to address the spending because we cannot sustain this way. It is irresponsible for the next generations. Look at the waste and the abuse that we see, waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government. It was just released last week that there were $36 billion of improper payments in Medicare alone. And so that kind of stuff is just unsustainable. We've got more than 47 different job training programs. None of them have really any accountability as to whether they're working. This is not a government that is working for you. And honestly, even having been in the military, the way we do business where we have redundancies and inefficiencies between the services. And if you don't spend your budget by the end of September, you're not going to get it in October, so there's often spending sprees at the end of the fiscal year. That's not the way we should be spending the hard-earned taxpayers' monies. So we need to address those spending issues by going line by line and through the budget, figuring out what's not working, cutting programs that don't belong in the federal government, while we're also growing the economy so that we can actually pay our bills.
Tell me one program that doesn't belong in the federal government.
An exact program?
Yeah.
Well, again, the 47 job training programs is a good place to start. Job training programs are best when they're locally based, right? And if there's going to be any federal dollars, it should be block granted to state and local communities so they can actually get the job done for those who need to be retrained to get back to work.
Now, I told you during my intro that I was bringing solutions, and so buckle your seatbelt. First and foremost, we have to repeal Obamacare because we know what that's about to do to our economy, and we can't afford it. Second, we need to remove the boot of the EPA off the neck of this country. Third, we need to return property rights to the states. Right now, we're literally sitting on $150 trillion over the next 10 years in natural resources that we can't have because the federal government has a lock on that property. It doesn't belong there, it belongs with the states. And here in our immediate area, we can do things like expand energy, mining, timber, ranching, farming, and all these things. One more thing, we can cut the payroll tax. And when you cut the payroll tax, that puts more money in people's paychecks, it encourages people to work, and it reduces unemployment. Now, the one thing that I would cut, I would severely defund the EPA by at least 80%. And this is completely doable, and it's not reckless, it's absolute common sense, because the EPA is mostly duplicative of every state's environmental agency. We don't need it.
All right, we'll start with Ms. McSally. Staying on the economy, in October, the House voted to end the government shutdown by raising the debt ceiling. Though Republicans voted against it by a 2-to-1 margin, it passed. The vote averted a potential global economic crisis by allowing the U.S. to avoid defaulting on loans, but some said the vote allowed Congress to continue spending without accountability. Would you have voted to raise the debt ceiling and end the shutdown?
Look, we are not a deadbeat nation, and we need to pay our bills. And I would not have supported shutting down the government. That hurt people right here in our community, and Congress should have seen that coming. I mean, that is another failure of leadership, that they wait until these things hit brinksmanship, and then they make people back on Main Street actually suffer for that. We have people in our community who weren't sure, who were furloughed, weren't really sure whether they're going to get, their pay to be able to pay their rent. We have veterans, especially disabled veterans, that weren't able to get the benefits that they deserve because of the brinksmanship in DC. So I would not have supported that brinksmanship that hurts people here. However, when I get to Congress, we have got to make sure, and I will promise you, that we've got to get our fiscal house in order. We've got to get to the place where we're no longer deficit spending, where we're balancing our budget, where we're acting the way we expect every single one of us to act in order to pay our bills. So we've got to move forward in order to get that spending under control and hold Congress accountable to do that, so it doesn't put us in these situations again where we're on the verge of either being a deadbeat nation, where we don't pay our debts, and that's going to have tremendous impact, or we're going to move forward and pretend we don't have a problem. That's the kind of leadership we need now, and that's the leadership that I'll bring.
Yeah, hold on, Mr. Wooten. You're right, it was an awful situation to be in, but I want to clarify, would you have voted to raise the debt ceiling and end the shutdown, yes or no?
Well, again, I wasn't in Congress, and I would not have voted to shut down the government, but we need to pay our bills. Those were two separate votes.
So you would have voted to raise the debt ceiling?
Again, we shouldn't have been in that situation, and I wasn't there. So
yes,
when I move forward, again, you're impacting the answer, and I wasn't there. So do we want to lose full faith and credit in the United States? I don't think so. So we've got to be able to pay our bills, but moving forward, we have to get our spending under control. So I would not have supported us losing full faith and credit.
Okay.
The situation was completely self-inflicted. We all understand that, and none of us like it. The fact of the matter is the federal government is still, even today, completely out of control with its spending habits. Think of the most addicted person to drugs or alcohol that you can think of, and you take that and multiply it by 1 million, and that's our federal government when it comes to spending. It has to stop. And having said that, I will be the guy that stands up here and says, I would not have voted for the debt ceiling to be raised, and you send me to Congress, and I will never vote for the debt ceiling to be raised.
Well, the good news is the government isn't going to get shut down this October because the Republicans have already put together a plan to kick the can down the road, surprisingly, past the election. So would I have voted to raise the debt ceiling? No. We cannot sustain the debt that we have. Folks, this is a really serious issue. We are spending money like madmen. Do you know that when they asked for $17 billion for the VA, do you know that they put that on 2 sheets of paper? They summarized the request for $17 billion on 2 sheets of paper. When I sit down with my husband and we want to buy something new, we spend a whole lot more time than 2 sheets of paper figuring it out. This is not a government that we can sustain. And we cannot continue to kick this can down the road, close the government. You want to know who really got hurt in that shutdown? The hot dog stand guy, the food trucks in Washington, D.C., the defense contractors who were told, use your leave. I'm done letting people play politics with our lives. It's time for a change.
Yeah, I'm the lucky one that gets to introduce new categories all the time. So we'll jump into a new category here. And it's something that we hear a lot from candidates all over the place, no matter where you turn, and they talk about jobs. Well, we're going to bring jobs. So this question is to ask the candidates, what are your specific solutions for creating jobs, and what is your definition of a good job? And we'll start with Mr. Chuck Wooten.
I actually gave you some already, so let's talk about them again. We have the ability, with the federal government out of the way, to expand our industries right here in CD2. Farming, ranching, timber, mining. That's one way. The other way, again, is to take the crushing regulations that the federal government has that are killing small businesses. These are job-killing regulations. I talked about the EPA already. We can talk about just about any federal agency that has the ability to run roughshod over our economy. The economy is, the federal government is actually killing the jobs that's keeping this. So you relax those regulations, which they should be, and take them out of the hands of the bureaucrats, small businesses will flourish and grow, and jobs will be created. That's as specific as I can get.
Did you answer that second part, definition of a good job? What's your definition of a good job?
A good job is a job for a person that wants to work making the salary that they want to make.
Well, let me start with a good job. A good job is when you work someplace where you feel good about what you do, you have meaningful work, and you are being compensated in what is, for you, acceptable. And I say that because I know three things. Everybody wants to belong, everyone wants a meaningful job, and everybody wants to be recognized. So that's what it's going to take. And part of the problems that we're seeing right now in our government is that everyone wants to work someplace, but you know what? We have people working right now in federal government that are afraid. Our whistleblowers are afraid. So we need to get to that. But first, let me just say this. For 25 years, I've been creating jobs. And one of the things I want to point out, we talk about immigration. There's something called an I-9 verification. I have to do that on every employee that I hire. And that determines whether or not they are able to work in the United States. Get government out of the way, let the free market work, stop all the regulations that we're putting on our small businesses, and create a free market system, and you will see jobs. You will see business owners like myself investing capital and growing. Thank you.
So the first part of the question is, what am I going to do in Congress to create jobs? This should be no surprise to you. Congress doesn't create jobs, right? Businesses do. Small businesses do. If we're relying on the federal government to create jobs, we've got the wrong view on things. That's the wrong philosophy. Congress's job is to create the environment through tax and regulatory climate so that small businesses can thrive and hire people and put them back to work. So when I get to Congress, I'm going to make sure that Congress actually does their job to make sure taxes are low, regulations are not burdensome, and small businesses, which create 7 of 10 jobs in America, feel some economic certainty so they can start growing again, hiring people, and moving our economy forward. When it comes to what's a good job, well, when I was in junior high school and I had to, go to a little bus girl job that I had when I was not old enough to drive, and so at 4 o'clock in the morning I'd head out to be a bus girl. That was a really good job, right? When there's kids in high school that are trying to just learn some entry-level worker skills, that's a really good job. So what's a really good job? It depends on where you are, who you are, and what you value in hard work. Ron Barber supports job-killing policies of high taxes, more regulation, and suffocating small businesses. And that's why we need to change who we send to Washington so that we can set the climate and let small businesses do what they do best.
I will start with Ms. Kais on this one, and This is for Sergio. I'll move to a new category for you. All right, we're going to Medicare and Social Security. So we got a big boy coming up here. Under current law, the projected expenditures for Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are neither supportable nor sustainable. At some point, there will have to be dramatic cuts in benefits. Is that the only way out? And please be specific on how you would continue funding these plans without driving us further into debt.
Okay, no, it's not the only way out. If this was a Democratic audience, they'd talk about raising taxes. That's not something we're looking at. There are many different ways out of this. First off, Medicare is sustainable to 2036, I believe it is, and Social Security to 2033. Now, when we talk about being insolvent, please understand that this doesn't mean 1 month you're just not going to get a check, it's over. What's going to happen is it's going to be at reduced rates. There are many solutions here. When we look at this, what happens when we have a Social Security deficit? What ends up happening, in other words, we don't bring in enough money and we pay out more. What we end up doing is cashing in bonds to supplement that amount of money. You want the solution to Social Security and Medicare? Get people working. When we get people back to work, we have the money coming in to support this. We used to have 7 employees for every retired. Now we have 1.75. That's where the problem's coming from. Get people back to work. Get the economy moving again and get the regulations off the small backs of businesses so that they can hire and bring people into business. Thank you.
So many people, like many in the audience today, have worked hard their whole lives, paid into Social Security, and they were given the promise that they were going to have Social Security and Medicare for them. And I support keeping those promises for those that are at or near retirement. Make no mistake, you probably saw the attack ads. Nancy Pelosi was running against me starting in January. I'm not going to repeat the attacks because they're lies. I promise you I will protect Social Security and Medicare for those that are at or near retirement. My mom, who's a widow, is depending on both of those for herself, like so many of you are in your retirement years. We have got to figure out how to sit down and make these programs sustainable and strengthen them for my generation and the next generation while we keep our promises to those that are at or near retirement. How do we do that? Look, it's math. Let's sit down and figure it out. I do not support what Ron Barber is on the record saying, which is cuts to Medicare and Medicare Advantage in order to fund Obamacare. He was in a debate with me at the U of A, and he called those cuts overpayments to providers. And that will equate to $1,500 a person. Many of you are probably on Medicare Advantage. Ron Barber supports them. Don't let him change his tune. He supported those cuts. We've got to sit down and figure it out. It's just math. We've got to bring the cost of health care down so it's not just impacting the cost of Medicare, but the cost of health care for everybody, so it's affordable and available. And I'm willing to sit down and come up with those solutions to strengthen them for the younger generations.
Right. Can you be specific, though? I mean, do you have any ideas right now under which we could continue funding the plans without driving us further into debt? You say we need to sit down and talk about it. We all agree with that.
No, we absolutely do. And again, for those that are 55 and over, we need to keep our promises to them that are at or near retirement. And as we sit down and figure out how we can bring more growth into the economy so that we can help pay our bills, which includes them, I would support that. I support patient-centered healthcare reform that brings the cost down. We pay almost 50% more than any other country, and that's impacting Medicare. So we've got to have healthcare tweaks that is not Obamacare that actually brings that cost down because that's impacting the cost of Medicare.
Okay, I offered solutions. We're going to do it again. Very, very complex topic, as you all know, but it's also 2 separate topics. It's Medicare and it's Social Security, 2 separate programs. So let's talk about them individually. On the Medicare side, of course, we've got a 75-year unfunded liability of about $30 trillion coming up for that over the next several years. Obamacare is only going to make it worse. there is a way to do a reform for Medicare that it has a common sense approach, and it doesn't involve changing the benefits for anybody currently receiving it. No impact on current recipients. Contribution should be defined by your income. The less you make, the less you pay. That's a specific to how we can improve this and make sure that it lasts for the duration. And it also needs to provide bankruptcy protection for those that is due to medical bills. On the Social Security side, reform is needed now. It's obviously unsustainable. It's been running a deficit since 2010. We need to have a gradual increase of the retirement age to 68. Again, this doesn't affect anyone currently receiving or about to receive Social Security. There's a flat benefit with a guarantee against poverty, which is very important, and it's based on fairness and stability for everybody. And included in that is a new retirement savings plan that would supplement Social Security that would be available to workers to participate. And this is a kicker, and an annual tax deduction. It provides incentive for people to work longer. Those are specific enough.
Freshman members of Congress begin their term in office with a 2-week orientation during which they are told by their parties to plan to spend 4 hours every day raising money for their re-election. I had to reread that before I said it. If you were told this during your orientation, how would you respond? And I have to ask the question to Ms. Martha McSally.
Well, thank you, Sergio. As I mentioned, I was actually at orientation and I didn't get that briefing, but in that hypothetical, you're absolutely right that we have people that get to Washington, D.C., and right away they're concerned about their re-election instead of serving and fighting for the people that they were elected to support. And leadership means doing the right thing that you were asked to do and go to Washington, D.C. Many of you know, I'll just give you the example of the kind of leadership I showed in the military, because I don't walk by a problem. I saw a U.S. servicewomen were being treated unfairly when they were stationed in Saudi Arabia. They had to basically sit in the backseat of the car and wear a burqa. I fought that for 8 years. And when 6 years into it, they ordered me over there and threatened to take me up on charges if I didn't comply with it. I complied for 13 months as I tried to get it through the system. And in the end, I filed McSally versus Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, and put my career on the line that was on track to be a senior leader in order to do what is right. I eventually got legislation actually sponsored and passed in the House and the Senate to overturn that policy once and for all. Moral courage means doing the right thing, regardless of the personal cost. And my pledge to you, if elected, is that I will go to DC and I will fight for you and I will represent you and I will do what's best for our country and our community. And I would hope that if I decide to run again, that you would re-elect me for doing that. And I'm not gonna play defense like Ron Barber is trying to protect his job. It's about service and it's about leadership. And that's my vow to you.
So to get back to the question, though, is there is there maybe something in your mind that might tell you what's best for the country is that you do spend 4 hours a day raising money for your re-election?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I will be fighting to fight for you and to do what's best for the country and the community as your representative in Washington, D.C. That has got to be the priority, and that's got to be where you spend all your waking hours.
But you would agree that the philosophy of elections, particularly every 2 years, is you almost are immediately running for re-election.
Well, you know, you are, and the Founding Fathers were created that way because the House of Representatives is supposed to be the pulse of the people and the voice of the people. But if people were actually doing their jobs and doing it well, then the re-elections would take care of themselves.
Yeah, I've heard of this phenomenon before. I think it comes from the book Extortion. It's really a book. This is not a career path for me, folks. You've heard my credentials. I'm not doing this for me, and I'm certainly not doing it looking 2 years down the road. I'm doing it for this time in this election, and I told you that. I'm not particularly interested in marching lockstep with anyone. I'm here to represent the people of this district in a real, substantial fashion. I'm not interested in what's going to be happening in 2 years because you're going to tell me what's happening in 2 years. If I'm not the guy that you want, that's fine. And again, I got to tell you, 2 years in Congress is probably long enough, but if you want me to stay, then I will. So, yeah, I'm not interested in being bullied by the Washington establishment to start posturing for re-election during orientation. Doesn't fit my plan, and it doesn't fit yours, so I won't do it.
Thank you, but surely you are not ignorant of the fact that it takes money to be elected.
Oh, I don't know. I don't have any now. You asked for it.
This is a question about money, isn't it? And raising money for re-election is a real interesting phenomena that we see. In these times of economic crisis in southern Arizona, I think we're going to see about $4 million spent to buy a seat. That's pretty tough for somebody who's watching money. Ladies and gentlemen, this should not be about money. This should be about you. It should be about you making a decision who will take your voice, who will represent you, and who will keep their fingers on the purse strings of the American financial system. That's what this is about. If they ask me to raise money 4 hours a day on the phone, I think I may have to say, sorry, sir, sorry, ma'am, because I haven't spent 4 hours a day raising money for this campaign, and that's no surprise. But I have spent a lot of time writing to Secretary Sebelius about Medicare, unveiling the fact that the president and the administration knew about the surge of immigrants on our border, and also now addressing the potential health crisis and the need for us to be aware of these issues. Thank you.
We're going to start with Mr. Wooten, and we're going to go where the president hasn't gone before, and that is foreign policy. With the multiple crises around the world, including the horrific shooting of a commercial airliner over Ukraine, what role do you think that the U.S. should play in helping pro-democracy movements around the world?
That's an excellent question, and you're right. The White House, for the last 5.5, almost 6 years, has been an MIA in our foreign policy, and we've become a global joke. It's unacceptable. The United States of America is the greatest, most powerful country on the planet. But I also know that the resident of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue doesn't have that in his sights to maintain. But it absolutely must, for every reason that you know. You're a high information voter. If you weren't, you wouldn't be here. You know what's at stake when the United States of America leads from behind. You know that that doesn't work. It has not worked, and it never will work. The United States of America needs to lead from in front. You know, regarding the Ukraine, you know, we had a 1994 treaty with these folks to defend them if they were attacked. Well, what happened? Yeah, what happened? Yeah, it's a pretty big deal. And you throw in what's going on with Israel and Hamas right now, and you know, this baffles me as well. Israel has been our greatest ally, as well they should be, in that region. And yet we've done everything that we can as a nation, again from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, to destroy that. And that must absolutely stop. We have some really bad people on this planet that want us dead or converted. And the red card's up, and I have to shut up. But you know where we need to be, as well do I. Thank you.
In 2005, Gerhard Schroeder loses to Angela Merkel, and he's no longer the Chancellor of Germany. But you know what? He got a great job. Goes over to Gazprom, the energy company in Russia. 2014, he celebrates his 70th birthday. Pictures of him hugging with Vladimir Putin. Is anyone surprised what's going on? The issues that are facing us right now on foreign policy are scary. I want you to go back for a while because I think some of you will remember as I do. Anybody remember going out in the hallway of your elementary school, sitting with your back up against the wall, pulling your knees up? Not quite sure why you were doing it, but you did it quite often. We were preparing. Is this the second Cold War we see coming? Do we have a president that is not showing up? Do we have a policy that's just ineffective? Yes. The answer is yes. Whether we're talking about Latin America, Israel, Germany, Poland, Ukraine, China, we're in trouble, ladies and gentlemen, with no foreign policy from an absence presidency. Thank you.
Okay, you weren't specific. What role should we play in helping pro-democracy movements? Let's take the Crimea, for instance. What should we have done in that case?
Well, going back to Gerhard Schroeder, by the way, he has a beautiful property in Crimea, so I'm sure that he was all in favor of that. Our pro-democracy programs come from the State Department, the U.S. Agency for International Development. We put millions and millions of dollars into this. Just for a quick number for you, in El Salvador, we've given 66 million. Guatemala, 104 million. In Honduras, 82 million. That was in 2013. We work in those countries to attempt to bring pro-democracy. It's not working. They don't like us. They don't think like us. We need to get that through our head. ISIS wants you dead. Sorry, bad news. So, in pro-democracy, yes. Do we need to work with other countries? Yes, we do. But we need to be very aware of what we're working for, and we cannot go into this with a naive feeling that we're going to bring people to live like you and I do. They don't have the same value. They don't have the same culture. I grew up in Panama. In 1978, Omar Torrijos said, "All Americans, dead or alive, out." My sister's in the audience. We brought our mother home. They don't think like us, folks. We need to understand it is time for us to stand up with strong policy. When we are weak, they are strong. Thank you.
Obama is absolutely failing to lead on this front, and our friends don't know if we're going to be there for them, and our enemies are no longer scared of us. And Congress is supposed to provide oversight to his administration on that. But we have less than 20% veterans. We have people who don't understand the issue. And Ron Barber is included. The best thing that you can do in CD2 to make sure we have a strong foreign policy is to elect someone to Congress who understands it. Barber has no role right now. He has no say. He has no clue. We've got not just what's going on with Russia, we've got China flexing its muscle in the South and the East China Sea. We have the greatest state sponsor of terror in Iran that is on the road to becoming a nuclear-capable country and is now running the Defense Department in Iraq. We have ISIS that's declared a caliphate between Iraq and Syria. We have a border that is not secure. We've got Al-Qaeda metastasized and a greater threat to us more than ever. I taught this stuff at the Marshall Center. I have 2 master's degrees with national security. I served on Senator Kyle's staff in national security and defense. We need to send someone to Washington who knows how to provide that oversight, protect our vital national interest. It's not about pro-democracy, it's about protecting our vital national interests, and Obama's failing and Barber's not helping. He doesn't have a clue.
Well, let me ask you the Crimean question then.
Yeah.
What should we have done in that situation if what Mr. Wooten says is accurate, that 20 years ago we had an understanding with Ukraine that we would defend them?
You know, when I was at the Marshall Center, I was teaching and training senior leaders from countries, including the Ukraine. I'm in touch with some of my students. They're in the military, in the border security operations, and they're fearing for, you know, what's next for them with the uncertainty there. Obama started this with his phony red lines and then, you know, just allowing the world to run amok because of his lack of leadership. Putin's not an idiot. Putin is taking advantage of that. We should be leading our allies to make sure that we make it hurt economically. Right now, Europe has got economic interests, so they're not cranking down. It's this failure of leadership and then assisting those in the ways that make sense, that's a good steward of taxpayers' money, in order to prevent this kind of behavior instead of reacting to it, because it's going to keep happening without the leadership, and certainly with no oversight in Congress with Ron Barber representing us.
All right, education. College students leave school with about $30,000 in debt on average. How can we make college more affordable and accessible? And would you support a budget that included cuts to grants and loans for college students? Ms. Shelley Kais.
Thank you. I think that college is not for everyone. I sit on the Joint Technical Education District for Pima County Schools, and you know what? We offer amazing programs right here in Pima County. And we have opportunities for kids while they're in high school to develop skills. Those kids could get skills that would help pay their way through college. Some students who are in college incurring all of this debt get to about that third or fourth year and drop out. Maybe because they can't get the funding, maybe because they're afraid of what it's going to take for them to get that back. Education should be available for students to apply for. Education should be available for students to get if in fact they are qualified for it. And what I mean by qualified is not everybody gets into college. We've opened the doors to academia, and I am an adjunct professor. I've been an adjunct professor for 15 years. I see students coming in that can't write, that have problems reading. Education is a problem, and we need to address it not only at the college level, but at K through 12. And it ties right into workforce development as we go along. Thank you.
I am very passionate about education. My dad came from very humble circumstances, and he was the one who made it out in his generation and was the first one to go to college. College provides a pathway for people to have economic prosperity, provide for their families and better opportunities for their kids, and it's our path to economic growth. But right now, the cost of college is absolutely skyrocketing, and these kids are graduating with debt that's unimaginable. Then they can't get a job, right? They're unemployed or they're underemployed. They're moving back in with their parents, and they don't have a future. It's impacting the housing market. It's impacting so much more. So I support trying to figure out how we can bring the cost of college down so it's available to those who want to go, and not saddling them and their parents with debt. I'm forming a college affordability task force that brings together people from all parts of the community and in all parts of the higher education in order to try and solve this problem. We have got to give them the opportunity and the availability to go to college, but we've got to make sure it doesn't put them in bankruptcy where they can never pay it back and they're not getting good jobs. So I'm committed to solutions that allows them access, but it's not sustainable for us to continue to have the cost rising at the rapid rates it has in the last 10 years.
part of the question was, would you support a budget that included cuts to grants and loans for college students?
Not right now, no. I mean, Ron Barber voted for a budget that actually raised the interest rates for students, and not right now. Right now, we have got to provide opportunity for our kids while solving our deficit, our challenges, and try and bring the cost of college down so it's sustainable.
A college education in the United States of America is a wonderful thing to have, but it is not a right, and we all know that. As a young 17-year-old with an acceptance to the Ohio State University, I had to make a very tough choice, and the tough choice that I had to make was take out student loans and go into debt up to my eyeballs, before I was 22, or figure out another way to get it paid for. I chose the United States military because we had a education benefit that worked very well. Unfortunately, today in 2014, about 75% of our young people are not qualified for the United States military. Did you know that? Yeah, that's true. So that's not even an option to them. So what do they have available to them? They have available to them a wonderful community college system right here in Pima County and also in Cochise County. Community college is a great way to figure out if that's what they want to do. Trade schools are another. So my point is, college costs what it costs. It always has and it always will. I don't necessarily agree with it, but my point is it's an individual student decision whether or not they do that. Now, as far as voting for lowering grants, was that a spending question, Mr. Scherer?
Would you support a budget that included cuts to grants and loans?
Yeah, that's a real tough one because I'm not for increasing spending, but I would also say if they're there in the budget now, then I wouldn't have necessarily, at least without looking into it, a problem with them remaining static.
All right, this is for Ms. McSally. Give us your description of a Tea Party Republican and tell us what you think they've brought to the party, good and or bad.
Well, I think we have many of them in the room, and I'm not going to certainly try and describe them or nail them down. So, look, I appreciate anybody who's engaged in our process. I appreciate people who are rising up to say we've got to cut spending, we're against Obamacare, we've got to rein in our debt, and we've got to make sure that our economy is going in the right direction. Those appear to be some of the fundamentals of those that are in the Tea Party. And what has been good for us is that we have a rigorous discussion and we have a rigorous debate of the things that so deeply are impacting our future. What I don't think is good for us is that we have divisions within our party where we're more focused on infighting with each other instead of actually working together on the things that unite us and actually moving forward to win elections. And so I love a healthy debate, and I'm excited to be hearing more from everyone across the spectrum in our community because there are different parts of our party and different thoughts within this room. If we stopped and took a poll, everybody would have a different feeling on many of these issues. So I so appreciate those that are engaged in the democratic process, that are passionate about what they believe in, and are moving forward for solutions that limit government, that cut spending, that repeal and replace Obamacare, and get our country going on the right track. And when I get elected, I will be representing everyone in our district and having all the ideas that come in order to move forward and find those solutions.
You know, the Tea Party is not a country club. They don't have a private handshake. You know. And what I will say is, if a patriot, if an American that cares about this country and loves this country is in favor of the Constitution as it's written, and that makes them a Tea Partier, okay. And I will also say that if a person is in favor of a limited government and that makes them a Tea Partier, then I think that's okay. And likewise, I would say that if a person thinks that a free market is the best way for our economy to grow and prosper, and our families to grow and prosper along with our communities, then I think that's okay too. So, in the spirit of full disclosure, I've been endorsed by the Tea Party. Because I believe those things are the very foundation of our country. What I hate is I hate this division among the Republican Party that has demonized people that are just trying to make things right because they see a wrong. So that's my 2 cents. Go Tea Party.
You know, this is a really great question because it's been asked to me before. So I looked at the 10 values of the Tea Party, and I can't list every one of them right now. But I remember I went down and I addressed each one of them. And I really looked in my heart to think how I felt. And when I got done, I remember calling Jack and say, you know what? I said to him, Jack, you know what? I think I'm a Tea Party candidate. Because I believe everything they believe. Reduce the national debt. Support the Constitution as it is. I believe these things. Lower spending, smaller government. When you go, and if you think you wonder if you're a Tea Partier, I want you to look at the 10 core values of the Tea Party. It's what we all believe. I am a Republican, and I support the Tea Party movement within our party. We need to come together, folks. This is something that is really important to me. Southern Arizona, we're at risk right now because we're not as strong of a Republican Party as we need to be. And we need to get together and we need to respect the values that movements like the Tea Party have, because when we look at them, we're going to realize we all agree on the same thing. And for us to be strong, we need to come together and work together.
Thank you. We've received a lot of great questions from the audience, but we are down to, we want to respect everybody's time. We're down to our last question before our closing statements.
So it's an honor. Thank you guys for being here, and I'm honored to do the last question. You guys have all great answers, so it's going to be a hard time here. The final question is, and this is something that's really near and dear to my heart, and to the people here in the district, because I preach this daily in my everyday. I mean, I live, eat, and breathe coming together as a whole. So the final question comes down to, if you are not victorious in the primary, will you pledge to support openly the nominee with the goal of electing a Republican to the seat? And the question goes to you first, Mr. Chuck Wooten.
Thank you. I've been asked this question a number of times. If you know anything about me at all, you know that I don't waver and I am a man of integrity. I have said unequivocally that yes, I will support the nominee publicly.
This is an interesting question, but it's such an easy answer. Why would a Republican not support a Republican? It would be about ego, and I'm going to leave that outside the door. When we win this, and we're going to win because we're going to come together and we're going to carry our candidate across the race, and we're going to bring CD2 back to the R side for the first time since 2006.
I would absolutely support our nominee.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go into closing statements now. Each candidate has 1 minute. We're going to go in reverse order, starting with Mr. Wooten. I can't speak for the candidates, but I'd guess they will be around for a bit after the debate to talk to anybody who'd like to talk to them. And again, we did receive quite a few really good questions from the audience, so I bet there are some folks out there who would like to talk to you. Mr. Wooten.
Thank you. Thank you again for hosting this important event today. I hope you've had as much fun as I have. With the serious problems that America is trying to valiantly to cope with every single day, it's time for empty campaign rhetoric. It's run its course. It's long past. We need solutions, not talking points. We need to know, you need to know that your representative is on board with your priorities and not their donors. We need to shout enough to the Washington establishment that got us into this mess. And we need to do it with our vote. Yes, a single vote in a single election in this district. And a vote for me is a vote to finally beat Ron Barber. My leadership and management experience is best suited to beat him. And a vote for me in the primary, I will beat Ron Barber. Thank you.
This has been a great opportunity to be here this afternoon, and thank you all for coming. You know, this race is about putting our government, your financial assets, your future, and the future of your children and your grandchildren back on course. That's what I do. I go into organizations and I put them back on course. We dig down and ask tough questions. We make difficult decisions, and we get back on track. We are not on track in Congressional District 2. We are not on track in Arizona, and we are not on track in our country. This is the epicenter of so many issues facing our government today. I understand those issues. I understand how to develop solutions, and I will work for you to do that. Thank you.
Thanks for everybody coming out today. I really appreciated the discussion. As I started off with, I'm retired Air Force Colonel Martha McSally, and I'm running for Congress because I don't walk by a problem. And we have lots of problems facing our country. More than ever, the issues before Congress are the issues in our community. Think about it. I don't need a briefing on the VA. I get my care at the VA. We've got a great center here for veterans, but we need care around the country that keeps the promises to them. I don't need to read in the news about the A-10, like Ron Barber did when I wrote an op-ed last year and the A-10 was going away. I fought in the A-10. I commanded a squadron of A-10s in combat. My mom depends on Social Security and Medicare. I got your back to make sure we protect our seniors as we move forward to strengthen those programs for the future and get our budget in order. And I don't need talking points in order to use intelligence-driven operations to secure our border. Bystanders like Ron Barber introduce bills, do press releases and op-eds, and try and cover his tracks. Leaders get things done. I have a record of leadership with proven results in the military. I'm asking for your vote. I'm asking for your support to fight and represent you in Congress. Thank you.
Thank you.